Hey. This is kinda a weird video for me. So this time, I decided to look at an indie title called Monster Crown. I gotta throw out a disclaimer and let you know I received this title through my buddy Stan, cause the dev gave him some free keys. I have no reason to have any sort of bias, but you should know that I didn't have to pay in order to play the early access build of this title. Monster Crown is a turn-based RPG that draws heavy inspiration from games like Dragon Quest Monsters, Monster Rancher, and of course, Pokemon. In fact, with the rise of games of this type, such as Monster Sanctuary, Ni no Kuni, and Temtem, I would expect us to see a new genre title start getting dropped, like monster collecting or Pokemon-like. Which is just me drawing parallels of Souls-like, roguelike, or even Metroidvania. I showed screenshots of this game to several people, and they immediately latched on to calling it a Pokemon clone. I know this title wears that name like a badge of honor, but when I hear clone, I usually think of something negative. So in Monster Crown, you begin the game by choosing your player character and having a heartfelt conversation with your father. He tells you about the world and the hardships you must overcome and persevere through. The next morning, your father wants you to take the family monster and feed it some pumpkins from the farm. These fruits grow all over the land. You can feed them to your monster at any time in order to give them some health back. And he then instructs you to take the family monster and then catch the family another monster. Using a pack scroll, you can very easily bring home another monster. Then that night, in the back of a comic book, you're given the chance to mail away for a monster to be delivered to your home. When the day arrives, the mailman comes with your choice of your first monster. I chose the whale thing, Darwol. I quite like the design. It is of the will type. Will type is one of 5 types in Monster Crown, and they affect each other in a damage or resistance circle, and no monster has more than one type, by the way. Will beats brute, brute beats malicious, malicious beats unstable, unstable beats relentless, and relentless beats will. Your father, overjoyed at the idea of you going off on your own adventure with your monster, leaps at the idea. Much to your mother's detest, you'll head off on an adventure to the Humanism Kingdom to meet the king. When you arrive at the first town, you'll see that it's a mining town. The locals want to be able to mine the mountain to grow the town's economy, not to line the pockets of a man named Jasper. Jasper has convinced the mayor to sell the mining rights to his company. After you have some discourse with the locals, you'll be caught in a fight to defend the town. After you defeat Jasper, he flees onto a boat across the lake. The entire town watches as the man is brutally killed by a monster. You leave the town and progress to the next location. As you're exploring the next town, you'll be abducted by a group of thugs and make a friend along the way. They rattle you around a bit, try to kill you, and your new friend saves you and escape. You know, the stuff that usually introduces a primary antagonist. In this new town, you're given the ability to fly back home with these giant birds. These birds also function as a way to access your monster storage system. When you fly home, you spend some time with your family. Your mother then teaches you about the synergy system. If you switch out during a battle, your new monster will be able to stockpile for a more powerful move. It's a neat system that if you'll encourage switching around your monsters. Switching is something that is very common in the competitive Pokemon meta in order to look for an opening in your opponent. When you finally arrive at the Humanism Kingdom, you meet the king and give him a gift. The king wants you to join him on a trip home to see your father, as your father and he are close friends. When you arrive home, you see your father has gone missing. You're given a canoe item that is used to cross a river, as your father has been abducted by some kind of monster. Upon your father's return, everyone is joyful and happy to reunite the family. The king's attendant then sets up a business on your farm centered around monster breeding. Using literally any 2 monsters, you may breed them into new and exciting forms. It is basically every kid's dream of what breeding could have been in Pokemon. And this is where I believe the early access build ends, since each road is blocked by some condescending woman. Okay, so I've got a bunch of comments and I'm not really sure where to start. Since this is an early access build, I'll try to approach them with that in mind. Firstly, the text is all out of whack. There's way too many spaces and some text boxes end with just one word or punctuation. I can see from the store page that the trailer doesn't have this issue, so I'll just assume that will be fixed in a future update. I also have an issue of how often your character is just teleported from one location to another. It should be used more sparingly and not just as a transition. These are really starting to sound like just nitpicks, so I'm going to list off the small ones I've noticed. Your XP slider seems to bounce around as you gain XP, and fainted monsters also get XP. I really hate losing all of my items when I black out, and more to the point, I shouldn't be able to accidentally press the wrong button on my gamepad and instantly forfeit and lose my inventory. The audio is far too loud, and the levels and the options are very broken. The world feels very cramped to me. Things like campfires and beds say yes, no, or cancel to options. The weather or time seems to change very inconsistently, and sometimes it seems like my party is thrown to the PC box before I even interact with the PC box. The Synergy tutorial definitely could use a better job at explaining the mechanic, and I was gay baby jailed right after the Synergy tutorial. This cave in particular doesn't seem to go anywhere, and eggs seem to just instantly hatch, and I had assumed this is only like this for this build. As for the other major issues I have, we have stuff like Jasper's death. I get that this is supposed to be an edgier Pokemon, but honestly this death is not really built up too well. I think it could do for either not killing him, or building up the disdain that the villagers have for him and why he's really ruining their lives. And that goes into a greater issue with all the towns so far, and that's that they currently don't feel like a location yet. They currently seem like a quota to meet just to have a town location. Each town so far only has one thing of note, and you move on after doing that one thing. The second location has a locomotive being built that looks like it could make for an interesting concept in a later build. And the last thing I want to discuss is the type system. I've mulled over this for a few days, and I feel like I understand what I want to say. Firstly, I don't understand why some things are what type. It doesn't make sense why some monsters are something like the will type, and more so, why some moves are the will type. Like if I look at a monster, I should be able to instantly know what type it is. I look at a Charmander, I instantly know it's a fire type, and yes, Pokemon's basic battle mechanic is based on the 18 type rock, paper, scissors matchup. This game only has 5 types that flow in a clockwise or counterclockwise circle, which is why I think the synergy concept is a good idea. It would just really help if I could more easily know which monster is good against what type without having to have a printout of the type circle in front of me. In other RPGs, fire is weak to water, and that's a basic enough idea for anyone to work with. I think the type system being refined would be a good way to bridge the breeding system, which is something I think could become the more interesting portion of this game. I just can't understand why I have 2 whales that are different names, types, and colors, but they are visually identical otherwise. I'd assume they inherited a type from one of the parents, but that doesn't make it work more. Even something as simple as a bird, fish, mammal, reptile, or even insect would be a decent way to start. I don't want to harp on things I don't like too much, let's talk about things I think the game does very well. So I gotta say that the sprite work in this title is nothing short of amazing. I'm a big fan of the Gen 1 Ken Sugimori artwork as well as the goofy sprites they used in the games, so this is exactly what I personally enjoy in games like these. The soundtrack is fun, and I feel they will have some really good pieces once the game is more fleshed out. It's super cool that the monsters will chase you around the map before a battle begins, and more to that, this game has a very nice battle transition into the fights. And lastly, I think the breeding system could be a real winner once the typing system is better fleshed out and the UI of the breeding location is improved. I'm quite happy with this game, and I'm thankful that I was able to try this game for free. Hopefully my observations aren't too harsh, but I feel they should be considered. I see a lot of promise in this game as they continue to grow their vision of making their own Pokemon game, especially since Game Freak has been dropping the ball for a very long time. This has been Saffron, thanks for listening.